I am Darren Springer, General Manager with Burlington Electric Department, also a proud EAN board member. And along with Jared, it's a privilege and an honor that we're going to be presenting the EAN 2025 Ann and Arthur Berndt Award. The Ann and Arthur Berndt Award, created in 2013 to honor two of EAN's founders. Sadly, Ann passed in 2017. Her spirit and legacy lives on, and we're grateful for Arthur's continued dedication to EAN. The Ann and Arthur Berndt Award honors network members who, like Ann throughout her life, and like Arthur to this day, have demonstrated vision, leadership, and commitment to creating a renewable energy future in Vermont, and it's awarded on an annual basis to an individual or organization that have shown bold leadership in support of efforts to transform Vermont's energy system towards one based on efficiency and renewable energy. The criteria for the award includes the following: extraordinary vision, bold, courageous leadership, support for change at a transformative system-wide level, deep investment in relationships and networks, capacity for change, commitment to working across diverse perspectives towards a higher goal, and time, commitment, and passion for the cause. And very proud to share that the 2025 Ann and Arthur Berndt Award recipient this year is Christopher Bray. Before we invite him up to say a few words and receive the award, we want to share a few thoughts about Senator Bray. And I wanted to start by sharing that I first got a chance to work with Chris back in 2013 when I was Deputy Commissioner at the Department of Public Service. And I particularly got the chance to work with Chris and his committee in the Senate on the net metering legislation in 2014 and the renewable energy standard that passed in 2015. And it's important to understand the context back then in terms of what we were trying to do with passing a renewable energy standard, because Vermont had tried and failed to do that multiple times over a period of years, and it was seen as a complete non-starter from a policy perspective. If you talk to people about it, they said, don't bother. We've tried, it failed, you don't want to touch that. And what happened is in 2015, due to some policy changes in other states, we started to have an opportunity because of some market changes to revisit that policy. And it's important to remember that the Vermont Senate at the time was, I think, a year or two removed from having debated vigorously and almost passing a legislative moratorium on wind energy development. So very challenging environment in which to enact renewable energy legislation. And in 2015, with the stars aligned, there was another go made at that effort. And Chris and his counterpart in the House, Chair Tony Klein, and their committees, and Rebecca Ellis is here. Rebecca was on that committee in the House. Vice Chair, they made the effort. And the RES would have been, at the time, Vermont's first binding requirement that our utilities actually retire renewable credits, the same as we do in other states throughout the region. And importantly, created the first of its kind Tier 3 strategic electrification requirement that is the regulatory foundation for a lot of the incentives and utility programs that we've talked about here today. And the bill moved, I think Rebecca remembers, pretty quick through the House. And then we ran into a brick wall in the Senate. And there was a lot of concern being raised in the Senate about a variety of issues, citing of renewable energy, various pieces. There was, I think I'm sharing something that people at the time knew very well, immense pressure on Chris and his committee to hold that bill and not to advance it. And I remember very, very vividly a kind of particular moment of truth where we didn't know, and I don't think any of the lobbyists knew, and I don't think any of the advocates or anybody else knew what was going to happen when Chris had to make a decision as chair of the committee as to whether or not to advance the bill and take the ire of his leadership or whether to hold it in committee. And as he did every time I've ever worked with him, Chris stuck to his principles. He did the right thing over the politically expedient thing. And he advanced the bill to the floor, and in doing so, he contributed significantly to Vermont's renewable energy and electrification leadership. And we thank him for that effort. I continue to have a chance to work with Chris in my current role at Burlington Electric, and he continued to be a leader with great integrity in the legislature, and he deserves credit as well for the, in my view, very underrated Energy Efficiency Modernization Act, which originally passed during the pandemic and was expanded as recently as 2024. And for any of the legislators here, I know I see a number of them, BED is going to ask you to extend it again, if you would, this session. But what it did was it took for the first time our energy efficiency programs that have focused on reducing kilowatt hours and said you can use a portion of these funds in innovative ways to support emissions reduction, which is where we want to be in 2025, thinking about how we can utilize the limited dollars that we have is to focus on emissions reduction. And so at a point in time where electric efficiency opportunities were beginning to change, we were phasing out LED light bulbs from the efficiency programs, that legislation's been a critical tool. And Jared mentioned earlier that Burlington Electric just in October boosted our EV incentives. And although Chris is not in the legislature right now, the work that you did on the Energy Efficiency Modernization Act is the reason we had the ability, when the federal government stepped back, to step forward with our best possible incentive, because we had that flexibility. So your work continues today to contribute to our ability to innovate in Burlington and throughout the state. I want to say that, you know, flexible programs like that create a good platform and then allow the participants to innovate over time is a hallmark, in my view, of the type of legislation that Chris would often support. And he deserves a great appreciation for giving us room to be innovative as practitioners. Beyond his very tangible and accomplishments and his legacy of policy development, I think everyone who's worked with Chris knows you could count on him to be fact and data driven. And that's what EAN is all about. So it's very, very fitting that we're here today to be honoring Chris. He has always been intellectually curious. He has always stood on principle, even when it was not the easiest politics. And in my view, Vermont is a way better place for Chris having served, and he is incredibly deserving of the recognition we're providing him today. Over to you.
So we're going to invite you up pretty soon, Senator Bray, but first, Darren talked a lot about the legislative experience, policies, bills. Since I don't get into that on EAN staff, I'm going to talk more about what it was like working with Senator Bray from my perspective. So I first got to know Senator Bray when he showed an interest in EAN's annual progress report for Vermont, probably around 2017. Sorry. And not only did he invite me in to present information from the report to the Senate Natural Resources and Energy Committee that year, he did so each year thereafter. And as soon as a new report would come out, he would often call me right afterwards with questions and to discuss the report. And I loved it. Usually when legislators call me, they have one or two specific pieces of information that they're looking for, and conversation lasts 5 or 10 minutes. And that's fine, that's great. But with Senator Bray, it was not uncommon for our conversations to go for an hour. And it's because he is so knowledgeable and curious. He often wanted to talk about what was behind the data, how different issues were connected, or how A affected B. Now, I want to be clear, the time that he spent understanding energy information and analysis wasn't because he didn't have other things to do. To the contrary, it was so important for him to know as much as he could that he just made the time for it however he had to. I remember multiple times during the legislative session when he would ask me to meet, and I'd say, "When works for you?" He'd say, "How about 7 a.m. in room 8? And I'd say, "I'll see you then." I fondly remember multiple early morning or late evening discussions with Senator Bray where I came to observe that he was often the first legislator in the State House and the last to leave. And I remember one winter evening, probably about 9 or 10 p.m., and I tend to be kind of formal, especially with legislators, and I always want to wear a suit. Today I'm a little dressed down in my tuxedo, but anyway, he FaceTimed me at 9 or 10 p.m., and I had always worn a suit to our meetings, right? And so before I answered his FaceTime call, I texted him to say, "I'm happy to talk right now, but I'm in a sweatshirt. Is that okay?" And he said, "Of course, so am I." But Chris Bray was a chair who wanted information, not just because he was intellectually interested, but because he knew that to craft responsible public policy, it should be based in solid facts, good information, and real evidence. He was a chair who was always doing due diligence, always wanting to hear different perspectives, especially among folks who disagreed, always thinking about how to solve problems. Of course, in the face of complexity and challenge, it can be really easy to throw your hands up and succumb to the tyranny of the status quo. And it is always easier to talk the talk than walk the walk. But not for Chris Bray. More than intellect, he also brings care and calm to his work. I remember once when he was speaking at a Rev conference, Senator Bray talked about growing up with a father and many other family members who were physicians, and how that informed his sense of care and service, and how later as an EMT himself with Charlotte Fire and Rescue, how that work informed his work as a legislator. He talked about how in coming to an accident scene as an EMT, amidst the flashing lights, debris, and all the commotion, he would quiet his mind and focus on what mattered. Where is the patient, and what do I need to do to stabilize them? He brought that same sense of care, of focus, and calm to his work in the legislature. I don't think I ever saw him lose his cool or speak with someone disrespectfully. To me, Chris Bray is the definition of a model public servant. I think most elected officials in Vermont care about Vermont and Vermonters, but good intentions are not enough. Senator Bray combined those good intentions and his care with curiosity, with humility and dedication to be one of the most effective energy and environmental leaders in Vermont's history. And I believe that we are all better off because of his approach to public service and policy making. To finish, I just want to say I feel so honored to have gotten to work with you during your time in the State Senate and as chair of Senate Natural Resources and Energy. And I'm just so grateful to have gotten to work with you. And while Vermont is still far too dependent on expensive and polluting fossil fuels, it is in large part because of Senator Bray's dedication that we have made some real progress over the last decade toward a more affordable, efficient, and clean energy system for Vermonters, certainly coming much farther than we could have without his leadership and service. So, Senator Bray, on behalf of EAN, it is our deep privilege and honor to present you with the 2025 Anne and Arthur Berndt Award.
Congratulations.
Here's your. We'll do a picture after. Come and share your.
Well, thank you so much, Jared and Darren, for the kind remarks. Thank you to everyone here for, I did write out some notes for myself, but the first version just said the word thank you 3 times across the top. On the way in this morning, I pointed out this beautiful view that we've got out there, and I said, wow, what a view. And the person I was walking in with said, yeah, what a carbon sink. So I said, okay, I'm with my people again. And of course, I have to have this, the EAN progress report with me. So honestly, the only way I can get even close to comfortable getting this award is to make it clear that I know I'm up here because of all the help I've had of so many people, including many of you and people with whom I've worked with over the last 20 years. It was about 20 years ago, on the first day of my first session in the House, that outgoing majority leader John Tracy said to me, I don't know why, he just sort of buttonholed me in the hall. I wasn't doing anything, but he said, politics is a team sport. And I thought that it proved to be excellent advice all the way along. The team were my fellow legislators, but also the administration, the utilities we worked with, the advocacy groups, citizens who would show up, And one of the, I would say, sharpest teams that I ever got to work with is the EAN family. I also wanted to pause, and I'm sorry that Arthur can't be here, but I wanted a special thank you to Ann and Arthur Berndt for their steady support of EAN, which has helped us all to do better work, and I think in at least two important ways. One is EAN has gathered, analyzed, and presented data, and good data is essential for creating good policy, sound programs, and well-crafted laws. No ifs, ands, or buts, you know. And second, EAN has gathered people together. This community, all of you coming together, not just for a big meeting like a summit, but also day-to-day work, small work groups, all of us sustaining one another and learning from each other. And in the face of our current national predicament, acts of community coming together and working and sharing is a particularly essential thing and a heartwarming thing at the same time. The other thing I wanted to emphasize about teamwork is that legislators, whether they realize it or not, I think sometimes can be a little oblivious. We pass a law and we think, great, we've done it, you know, and but all we're really passing is a blueprint. It is something on paper describing what has to be done. It's a vision, and it's great to have a vision, but then it has to be made real. And I would say all of you are the builders. You know, you take the blueprint, you improve the blueprint, thank you, and you make programs real and active. I just mentioned the significance from my point of view of good information, and you know, I would say there's maybe a little bias here, Vermont exceptionalism, but I don't think it's too far off. The EAN annual report is an outstanding resource for anyone in the state of Vermont. When anyone ever would say, "Oh, what's going on?" I'd say, start with this report. It's encyclopedic, but it also distills a tremendous amount of information. And honestly, I think probably anyone in any state could benefit from reading this, because it is a great resource and maybe a model for other states to figure out how to gather and share information in their state. So with that, I'd just like to pause and ask everyone to recognize Jared, Kara, and the team for creating this monumental piece of research and the annual report. So. And as much of a nerd as I am, and I love to have data, legislating is not just drafting facts, figures, and all the rest. It's also really what I think draws everyone to this work is that we're interested in helping people. And so I'd like to just share two very brief stories from committee time, which is a pretty marvelous thing. People come from all over the state, and they sit down and they generously share information and help you understand what's going on. They educate us. They do us a great favor. The quality of our work in the building is exactly proportional to how well we bring in information from outside the building. So the first story actually was shared, and one of the folks here today, I won't out this person. It was about a low-income weatherization tour in Barrie. There was an elderly woman who lived alone. She was in a unit that had Capstone came and did their great work. And as part of that tour, he said, well, "How do you like your place now that it's been changed? What do you have to say about that?" And she said, "Well, the best thing is now when it's cold, I can sleep in my bed." And which I think, it's sort of a puzzling remark. And he said, "Well, where did you used to sleep?" And she said, "When it was cold, I would sleep on the kitchen floor, in front of my stove with the stove running and the door open. So, I tried to imagine my mother sleeping on a kitchen floor because her place was so cold. The other story that sticks with me is a year after the 2023 floods, we're working on the Flood Safety Act, a sad consequence of what's happened with climate, with more rain and more intense rain. And it was a young mother, and she said she was talking about her experience having lost her home. And also, so now she said, when it rains, it doesn't matter how hard, I begin to cry. And I get my kids together and put them in the car, and we drive up to my parents who live on higher ground. So we don't just touch law, we also end up touching people's lives. And that's why I find it such a profound honor to have been able to serve in the legislature. In the months since leaving the State House, I've decided to take up working on a master's in energy law down at Vermont Law School. We're so fortunate to have a great school just down the road, so that I'd be better equipped to come back to the work. And so I'm regarding this award really as a down payment on work that I want to do in the future. For me these days, I'm giving a lot of thought about what's next. How about a green version of Project 2025? Our own Project 2029, who knows? I don't want to be too derivative, but we all know what I'm talking about. Or how about a green version of ALEC, And I think actually John is talking about exactly that thing, with a shop that will help us have model laws and policies that can be shared. In the wake of, I think Sue Minter is here, the Czarina and Neil, both who played roles post-Irene. In 2011, in the wake of Hurricane Irene, we didn't just build back. The mantra was to build back better. And in the years ahead, in the wake of a current hurricane, we name hurricanes after men now, right? So it could be John or Donald or who knows what we would name it. There is a need to rebuild from this storm in environmental law. And it will present us with a once-in-a-generation opportunity to build back better. So I, for one, can't wait to get started. And in closing, thank you again to Ann and Arthur for their vision and support for EAN. Thank you, Jared and Kara, for nurturing the organization and all of us. And thanks to all of you in the room for your inspiring work. So let's carry on. There's a lot to do. Thank you.
Here's your... So there's a few gifts in the gift baskets for Karen and for Chris. One thing I just want to point out, because it's really fun, is of course Chris is from Addison County, and one of the great local businesses in Addison County is bow ties, and he is known for. Today he's wearing this.
It's very conventional.
But this is a. You can open it up. It is.
I almost put a bow tie on this morning, but.
It says energy affordability or environmental protection bow tie. And, there's socks in here for your rucking, and for Karen, your hunting. You both have darn tough socks. So great local Vermont businesses that are in there as well.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.